The hall smelled of orchids and champagne, but beneath the glittering lights of my engagement ceremony, it felt like the air itself was choking me. Ethan gave my hand a gentle squeeze, leaning close so only I could hear. "Relax, Anna, tonight's supposed to be about us." I tried to smile, but my parents' stares from across the room cut deeper than any blade. They stood together, as always, united, cold, unshakable. My father, Richard, leaned against the wall, his watch gleaming like a warning under the chandelier. My mother, Leia, wore that perfect, polished smile that never reached her eyes. They weren't here to celebrate me, they never were. I'd been dreading this night, not because of Ethan, but because I knew my parents would turn it into another weapon. Every milestone in my life was just another excuse to remind me that I was second to Chloe, their flawless golden child. And I was right. When the photographer called for a short break, Dad crooked a finger at me from the side hallway. Ethan caught my hesitation and whispered, "It's fine, go, see what he wants." So I went. My heels clicked against the marble as the laughter and music faded behind me. Dad stood waiting, scrolling through his phone like this night wasn't mine at all. "Where's the 137 grand, Anna?" His voice was flat, not a question, an order. I blinked. "What?" "The wedding fund," he snapped, lowering his voice. "The money you've been saving for 4 years. Hand it over." My stomach tightened. That fund was the only thing I had that was truly mine. 2 jobs, endless shifts, sleepless nights, every dollar a piece of me. "Dad," I said carefully, my voice shaking, "that's for my wedding, Ethan and I." "I don't care," he cut me off, eyes hard. "Chloe needs it." "Of course, Chloe. She needs a down payment for her condo," he said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Your sister's future comes first." I let out a bitter laugh before I could stop myself. "She already has everything, her car, her wardrobe, her college. I earned this. This is mine." His jaw clenched. Suddenly, his hand slammed against the wall beside my head, the sound echoing through the hallway. "You think we're letting you waste it on some tacky little ceremony," he growled. "You're lucky we're even letting you get married." My chest burned, but I forced the words out. "No, I'm not giving you the money." That's when Mom arrived, heels clicking like a countdown. She smirked when she saw me cornered. "You really want to humiliate yourself on your engagement night," she drawled. "Give your father the money. Find another way to pay for your little fantasy." I said no. My voice cracked, but I stood my ground. Her smile sharpened. "Eat dirt, Anna. That's all you deserve." I turned to leave, but before I could move, Dad stepped forward and drove his foot hard into my stomach. The air ripped out of me. I stumbled back against the wall, clutching my middle, my breath shattering into broken gasps as pain tore through me. "Richard." Ethan's voice thundered from behind us. He had seen everything. The music in the hall screeched to a halt. A ripple of gasps and whispers rolled through the crowd. Somewhere, a glass shattered against the floor. Dad turned slowly, his expression cool, like he hadn't just kicked his own daughter in front of the world. "Family business," he said flatly to Ethan. "Stay out of it." But Ethan didn't move. He stepped to my side, steadying me with one hand while glaring at my parents. "You're unbelievable," he said through clenched teeth. "She's your daughter. She's a burden," Mom snapped, arms folding tight across her chest. "If she cared about this family, she'd do what's right." Pain ripped through my stomach, but I forced the words out, low and unwavering. "You're not getting my money." The silence that followed was sharper than glass. My parents stared at me like I had spat a curse, but for once, I didn't look away. Ethan's arm anchored me, but I caught the flicker of fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for me. And that's when something inside me broke. The version of Anna who begged for their scraps of affection, who twisted herself into pieces for their approval, she died right there under the orchids and champagne lights. I didn't realize it in the moment, but that kick was the spark. The start of a war none of us would come back from. Sleep never came that night. Hours after the party ended, I still felt Dad's boot in my ribs and Mom's laughter echoing in my skull. Ethan tried to soothe me, his voice soft where theirs had always been sharp, but my mind was a wildfire, every memory of their cruelty feeding the flames. By 3 a.m., I was on the living room floor with my laptop open, Ethan asleep on the couch. My bank account stared back at me. $37,000. 4 years of exhaustion distilled into numbers. Every double shift, every dawn, every sacrifice. That fund wasn't just money, it was proof I'd clawed my way out of their shadow. Proof that I could stand on my own. And tonight, they tried to take it from me. But here's what they never understood. I am my father's daughter. He taught me how to calculate, to scheme, to trap, and I learned far better than he realized. If Richard and Leah thought they could humiliate me and walk away untouched, they were wrong. I opened a hidden folder on my laptop. I had been building it for years, without fully knowing why. Inside were photos of Chloe's luxury condo, and her fully paid car, both in my parents' names, both funded with borrowed family money. Screenshots of Dad bragging about hiding assets to dodge taxes. Records of Mom siphoning Chloe's scholarship funds into shopping trips. Evidence. Ammunition. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the powerless one. I'd never used any of it before. 4 years, I clung to the faintest hope that one day they might finally see me, not as a pawn, not as a mistake, but as their daughter. Last night shattered that illusion for good. Jail would have been too easy for them, too clean. I wanted something slower, something that bled, something that tasted like poetry. The first step was Ethan. The next morning, I brewed coffee and laid everything bare, the manipulation, the theft, the years of erasure. With every word, his jaw tightened, anger simmering just beneath the surface. They can't walk away from this, Anna, he said at last, his voice shaking with fury. Not after what they did. They won't, I whispered, sliding a photo across the table. Chloe stood in front of her condo, grinning, champagne raised in triumph. This place isn't hers, it's in Dad's name. And what Dad doesn't know is that the HOA's already filed a lien. Ethan's eyes narrowed, meaning. I let the faintest smile tug at my lips, meaning, with the right nudge, they'll lose it, everything they funneled my money into, gone. But stripping them of one condo wouldn't be enough. Richard and Leah thrived on control, on power. To break them, I had to dismantle the thing they prized above even money, their image. 4 decades, they played the part of the perfect family, the polished couple with 2 daughters, Chloe, their golden angel, and me, the rebellious disappointment. Neighbors adored them, colleagues praised them, the church practically worshipped them, but reputations are fragile when you know exactly where to press. So I pressed. I collected everything, Chloe's fake scholarship invoices, Dad's offshore transfers, Mom's charity donations, that conveniently ended up in her shopping account. Every slip, every stolen dollar, every lie. And then, I waited. 2 weeks later, Dad called. His voice was as sharp as ever. You've had time to think, Anna. Send me the $137,000, or there won't be a wedding. I almost laughed. Actually, Dad, you might want to focus on Chloe's condo. Heard the HOA's moving forward with foreclosure. Silence, a long, deadly silence. Then, what did you do? Nothing you didn't do to yourself, I said, and hung up. That was the first domino. Within days, Chloe's condo slipped away. Her car, also in Dad's name, was repossessed after a well-placed tip about unpaid loans. I could practically hear Mom's shrieks echoing across the neighborhood when the tow truck came. But the real blow was still on its way. Because while they scrambled to plug holes, I had already dropped every piece of evidence, every invoice, every screenshot, every dirty little secret, into the hands of the one man they couldn't afford to cross, Reverend Graham. The head of the church board where Dad served as treasurer. One anonymous package. One perfect storm. 3 days later, during Sunday service, Reverend Graham stood before the congregation and quietly announced an investigation into financial irregularities. I didn't need to be there to picture it, the whispers, the stares, the shift in the room as the perfect facade began to fracture. Invitations to fundraisers vanished overnight. Dad was forced to step back from his treasurer duties. No headlines, no handcuffs, just silence, shame, and the slow death of the empire they built on lies. A death by 1,000 cuts. Ethan studied me from across the kitchen that night, his voice low, steady. "You've changed," he said. I shook my head, sipping my coffee. "No, I'm just done." But deep down, I knew this wasn't the finish line. This was only phase 2, because Richard and Leia thought money and respect were the pillars holding up their empire. They were wrong. The last thing I was going to rip away was the crown jewel they'd lorded over me my entire life. Their pride. The night of my cousin's engagement was a blur of chatter, clinking glasses, and hollow laughter. Every relative was there. The aunts and uncles who whispered about what a troublemaker I'd been. The cousins who grew up watching my parents parade Chloe like royalty while treating me like background noise. I hadn't planned on attending, but sometimes, fate hands you the perfect stage. Ethan walked beside me as we entered the hall. The ripple of murmurs was immediate: shock, disdain, curiosity. The black sheep had returned. And there they were, Richard and Leia, stationed near the buffet like royalty, Chloe at their side in glittering gold, sipping champagne as if nothing in the world had touched her. I walked past them without a glance. The night moved on, toasts were made, laughter rose and fell. My palms were damp, but my heart was cold and sharp, because tonight wasn't about begging. It wasn't about fighting. Tonight was about ending the illusion. When the speeches ended, the host smiled brightly and handed me the MIC. A few words from the bride's cousin, they announced. I rose, heels echoing against the marble, and looked out at the sea of faces I'd known my entire life. I wasn't going to speak tonight, I began, my voice calm, but since everyone I grew up with is here, maybe it's time you heard the truth. Richard stiffened, Leia's smile wavered, Chloe froze, her glass half raised. You all know my parents, I said, glancing at them, the proud couple who raised the perfect family, but what you don't know. I lifted a thick folder, pages fanned like blades. Is what they did to make it look that way. I pulled out page after page, holding them high. Here are the so-called charitable donations, wired directly into Chloe's shopping fund. Here's her scholarship, money stolen from another student. And here, Dad's offshore transfers, hiding wealth while they played the part of the sacrificial, struggling parents. Gasps rippled through the hall, phones rose, pictures snapped, murmurs spread like fire. I turned to my mother, my voice steady. You laughed when Dad kicked me at my own engagement, told me to eat dirt. Well, tonight everyone gets to see the dirt you've buried yourselves in. Richard lunged, reaching for the folder, but Ethan stepped between us, his voice sharp as a blade. Touch her, and you'll regret it. I shifted my gaze to Chloe. Her smirk was gone. That condo you flaunted, foreclosed, that car, repossessed, and the reputation Dad spent decades crafting, shattered. Whispers sharpened into condemnation. Stolen donations, someone muttered. Tax fraud, another hissed. Then it happened. Their oldest friends, the ones they'd bragged to, dined with, prayed beside, stepped back from them as though they carried a disease. That's when I smiled, not from joy, but from finality. You spent your lives convincing me I had no worth, I said, lowering the MIC. Tonight, everyone knows who the real trash is. I set the microphone down and walked out, Ethan's hand in mine, leaving behind a hall humming with betrayal and disbelief. By morning, their phones were under siege, neighbors, bankers, church leaders demanding answers. The masks they'd worn for decades cracked and crumbled in less than 24 hours. Weeks later, they were stripped of their church positions, blacklisted from every circle that once praised them, audited to the bone. Chloe was back under their roof, her gilded life reduced to ashes. They had wanted me broken, on my knees. Instead, I left them crawling in the ruins they built with their own hands. And for the first time, I was free.